everybody. Andy Goldberg here. Welcome back to the Founders Chair podcast. Very, very excited to have on the show today Mark Cummings from Invicta Public Affairs. Mark, welcome to the Founders Chair.
Morning, Andy. Nice to meet you.
Really excited to hear your story, Mark, and hear what you've built up in your company. Can we just start by hearing a little bit about you personally, where you're from, your family, your hobbies, that kind of thing? We like to get to know the person behind the business.
Absolutely. Unlike many of the people that you interview, I'm not a native Glaswegian. I chose to live in Glasgow, which I think gives me the edge, and I always remind people of that. I grew up actually in the east coast of Scotland, just north of Edinburgh in Fife. Spent my formative years there, and left the Kingdom of Fife. You go to university, where I went to study politics in Stirling, and then public policy at Strathclyde. That drew me to Glasgow for the first time, and then after a period of my career of working in Edinburgh and London, I then ended up, founding my business in Edinburgh and then decanting it over to Glasgow in 2013.
And you live in Glasgow now?
I live in Bearsden, just outside Glasgow, and I have my main office for the business in the city centre.
Excellent. Tell us the story, Mark, about how the business just came about at the first part, and really at what point did you feel you had the confidence to go into business for yourself and do it on your own?
So, I'm from a long line of private business people. I would give the best, credit for where I am today to my grandfather, who was an antiques dealer. That's what he did. When he demobbed from the Second World War, he set up a successful, in my hometown of Kirkcaldy, antiques, business where he bought and sold antiques from a high street location, and then also in the wholesale market. And I grew up around this. My own father had his own business as well, building and roofing company. So I was surrounded by people involved in business, Andy, on a daily basis. None of them involved in the kind of business I'm involved in, which is kind of, knowledge led. They were obviously, effectively merchant led. They were doing things and providing things. But when you grow up around that, obviously it fuels an interest in how people make money. And, my granddad taught me a very important lesson that, to be in his line of work as an antique dealer, you have to be a very good middleman. So you have to know the person that wants to disinvest something, i.e. the antique that they no longer value, for which you can buy it at appropriately good rate, and you need to know the person that wants to acquire it, and you need to facilitate that transaction, because in that transaction you make a margin and everyone's happy. The person selling is happy, the person buying is happy. And I've got to say to you, I've used that principle as an advisor and a consultant entirely through my career, because that is fundamentally the role of a, intermediate like myself, who is an advisor to a client, connecting people with the target audience that they want to engage. In my case, people who are in public life and in public authorities and in the political space. And I've always held to those principles, and my grandfather was correct, that, to be, in that role, you have to be interested. So that was my reality growing up. Private business was the norm, not the exception. When I went to university to study politics, that really was the exception. I was the first generation of my family to go to university. It's now routine. Everyone is going to university. My niece has just got, a first class honours degree. She's overtaken me as the highest achiever in the family. It's become the norm, right? So that's gone. But I was at that time the first, generation. And I recall actually having conversations with family members and telling them I was going to go and study politics. They assumed I was going to study law, because that is a profession, and they could understand that because as private business people, they used lawyers and paid lawyers. And that would seem to them to be a step up from what they were doing, as, private business people in their own right. So that was a bit of a shock to them. And then obviously I progressed that interest in politics. And then at the end of my studies, after I did my master's, I then joined the civil service and worked for the government. And other than anyone being in the military, no one in my family had ever worked for the government in any capacity. So many had been in the military, but that was completely alien to them as well. But they didn't really understand what I understood, that I was building a strategy in terms of an innate interest in a subject area of politics, experience of the other side of politics, which is serving those elected as opposed to, engaging those elected. And ultimately, I did that, Andy, for 4 years, got quite a lot of very good experience working for central government, London and Edinburgh, and then moved out into a trade representative body to represent a sector body in terms of engaging Parliament and government. Did that for 2 years. Then I got approached to come into the private sector, to head up a then failing public affairs practice in Edinburgh, part of a wider UK firm. And this office was the runt of the litter. It was loss making, not profit making, a bit of an embarrassment as well. So I took that challenge on, I turned it around, and within 2 years, I'd made that the second most successful commercial team out of 7 in the UK. And it really is by process of that I decided, if I can do that, I could start my own firm, my own advisory firm. It wasn't a conscious thought going into that role. It just became an obvious thing to do after I was sort of 18 months in.
So you had a lot of people around you in your family that own their
Mhm.
own businesses, they're entrepreneurial. So you were aware of it. It was very visible to you. So you probably took a lot of it in just through osmosis.
Right.
Was there anybody there who directly inspired you or pushed you or challenged you, or was it more just a natural, obvious thing to do?
See, it's interesting because the people in my family, for example, my father had a building and roofing firm and focused on commercial renovation projects. So restaurants, hotels, small hotels, bars, those types of, small commercial businesses that need to periodically invest. He specialized in that. Grandfather was an antiques dealer. One of my uncles was a coal merchant. Another uncle was, a fruit and veg merchant, and sold into the hospitality sector. Another uncle had a car dealership business. So all doing effectively the same thing, you know, buying and selling, providing something, but all with different interests. So I looked at all of this and thought, well, I like business. I'm interested in the process of, being able to provide a service or, sell a good. But then you have to work out, Andy, what you are interested in uniquely that's going to make you successful. You can't just go into any form of business, and just, immediately with no background achieve success if you're not, one, very interested in what that business does, and two, actually quite good at it. So that's where I think you have to find your own pathway. So I was encouraged, obviously, to explore business. I was around it all the time when I was in my teens. But I never felt that any of those businesses would be the right fit for me because I just didn't have the interest in what they did on a day-to-day basis. So that's why I went off and pursued my own. And of course, I was going for the first generation of the family to seriously invest in higher education and want that to be the first thing they did, not, a side thing. So that just took me down my own path. And I can still recall telling people that when I was joining the civil servants, that they just couldn't understand why you don't want to work for the government for a fixed salary. They're looking at the job offer letter, and my dad said, that's not very much. I said, but it's not about the salary today. It's about the capacity I'll be able to build over 3, 4 years and what I'll be able to do at the end of it. I hadn't told him I planned to set up a business at some point, but he understood. But yeah, I mean, I was just surrounded, for a lot of people, they've not had the experience of private business until they land in it themselves. I grew up around it. I can fondly remember sitting in my grandfather's antique store during the school holidays, watching him buy and sell things and just been fascinated with the process. So.
Yeah, because I guess there's bartering that goes on, and
Right.
a bit of salesmanship maybe. Uh,
100%. And then the fundamental thing, contrary to popular misconception about private business people, the value that you have to place in the relationship you have with your customers, and the trust that needs to be built up between all parties in business to have the confidence to do those transactions. And again, there's a easy way to tar business people as being almost cutthroat, not trustworthy. All my experiences, Andy, in the private sector, I can honestly say to you that the people I meet and deal with are much more trustworthy, collegiate, cooperative than they ever were when I worked for the government. And let me assure you, in public service, where it's a pyramid system and there's only so many top positions, that's cutthroat. Trying to get to the top of the food chain when you're working for the government is a hard, hard shift because there's so many factors that can derail you and it's not merit based. In the private sector, everyone's free to put their best foot forward and, choose their alliances. So I've never had any negative experiences, in the nearly 20 years that I've been in the private sector in my own right.
Tell us a little bit more about Invicta Public Affairs. What do you actually do, and who do you do it for?
Sure. So a common misconception is that we are a PR firm, and we are a PR firm in the sense that, all of the tools that we use are very similar to any public relations firm. And we're obviously engaged as, a private business in advising and supporting other private businesses. I don't work for anybody who receives public money. That's a choice I make. Not all of my competitors make that. But having been someone who has been heavily involved in politics and in public service, I didn't feel it was appropriate to go down that route. So I put myself in a marketplace where I will focus on, only working with private businesses or not for profits. Our role is to advise them, guide them, and then advocate in their behalf. The difference in what we do is that every single job that we will take on will have a decision at the end of it, Andy, that is ultimately going to be determined by either someone in public office or the political system that underpins it. So there are no instructions that we take on that will not involve the government doing something or not at the end of it, whether that's at national government or local government. And that will either be a policy decision that the government makes to, support something or not support something, and that's the space we play in, or it'll be a regulatory decision where they permit something or don't permit something. So that, is very clear for me because I know when my clients need me, that there'll be an outcome that they're seeking, and that allows me to gear my services towards their needs, and it also allows me to be accountable in that process. And I'm not in any way besmirching the PR industry, but they often don't have that clarity in terms of the instruction that they're given. There'll be a general desire to raise the profile of a company and better promote a company. We obviously do that in the course of our work, but at the end of it, there'll be a judgment point where people can say this objective that we asked you to help us achieve, it's either been achieved or not. And I thrive on that accountability. I welcome it.
Mhm.
That is actually what keeps me motivated and has always kept me motivated about being, a public affairs advisor. But some people hate it. When they come into our industry, they don't like that, cliff edge point of accountability. They despise it and they run from it. But it's just the nature of things. I mean, I'm confident that in any client that we advise who engages us, that we will materially improve the chances of success, commercial success, when they engage with the government, whether that's to get the government to allow them to do something, build a supermarket, for example, or build 500 houses, or whether that's to change policy for farming, for example. I'm confident that we will have a positive effect on where they would have been had they not used us. Can I guarantee them that I will definitely win? No, because I'm not the decision maker, but I can guarantee them that without us, they have less chance of winning. So, and that's where the name Invicta comes from. I mean, if you've looked it up, Invicta is actually Latin for undefeated. So, a bit of a bold claim, but that when I was thinking of how to badge my company, I wanted to give an absolute commitment to our clients that we were their advisors and we are on their side.
Yeah, I like a Latin word for a company name as well. It gives it some gravitas, doesn't it?
It does. It's also the motto of the County of Kent, and on a purely practical point, there are no companies in the UK and Scotland using it. There are 94 in the south of England, so I didn't face any competition in trademarking it. But that's just a practical point I went through with my lawyers, but I liked it as well. I wanted to give my clients a mission statement. Again, I go back to what I've said actually to my team all the time. No one has to use our company. It's always a qualified choice, and we need to live by the values that we set out. No one has to use a public affairs advisory firm. There are times in life you need to use a lawyer, an accountant, to be compliant with, what you are required to do. No, there's no need to use a public affairs advisory firm. It's a
Yeah.
qualified choice. So we need to give clients an absolute commitment that we are on their side, and that is why we exist, Andy. Without that client relationship, there would be no business.
What let's go back a little bit to your kind of journey as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. What would you say has been your biggest learning to date?
I started the company formally in October 2007, having had a period of garden leave from my directorship of a wider, business. And yeah, I mean, I hadn't appreciated. It's actually quite easy to start a firm like mine. It cost me £50,000 of startup capital. I was already running a successful, profitable practice, round the corner in Edinburgh from where I was going to land my own office. I had successfully negotiated my exit, respected my previous employers, agreed a distribution of some, compensation for loss of clients. No point having a fight over these things. We just agreed it as adults, and of course, I was going to benefit from having been a director. And all that went so well and so easy that you get into, and after 24 months, you're trading successfully, you're profitable, you've never had a month where you haven't made money. But then you have to realize, actually, that was the easy bit of it, right? Sustaining this
Hmm.
is the hard part of it, Andy. Sustaining it is hard, particularly in an industry like mine, which has no assets. It is a revenue-based industry. You're trading in intellectual property. So sustaining this, and I mean, I'm very proud that, we're now in our 18th trading year. That's actually quite an achievement. And I am, and not that I'm saying I didn't think I would get there, and we've comfortably got there, but it is that constant process. And what I learned in that is that there's periods in time, every probably 12 to 24 months, where you need to fundamentally review your business, the health of your business, what you're doing with it, and then constantly reinvest. And if you don't reinvest and you just focus on, income generation and profit distribution, then you're actually setting your business up in the future to struggle. So we constantly reinvest in our business. You know.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners that have been in business a long time, and you know, there's always challenges, there's always problems that come up, and I kind of get a sense sometimes that business owners get tired of that, and they think, well, why is my business getting all the problems? Why am I always the one to come in every day and make decisions and try and solve things? And um, but it's just part of the game, isn't it? And
Yeah.
a long-term sustainable growth business, that's your job. A lot of it. I mean, I'm asking you, not telling you, but that's our job as business to solve these problems all along the way.
It is the reason why you are the owner and not just one of the employees. Your appetite to deal with that challenge, and to welcome it. And I actually, as I said, although it struck me the first time when I got the first churn of key personnel, because again, the gestation period of a good employee in my industry is 2 to 3 years, right? And even no matter how good an employer you are, and we're a good employer, we have good benefits, we pay well, but you're still going to get after 3 years young professionals who are well educated getting itchy feet and wanting to try something else. So then people who respond negatively to that change and say, oh, this person who I built my business around is now leaving and I don't know what to do. Well, in our business, Andy, we're entirely leveraged by the human assets that we've got. I mean, 65% of my costs are attributable to people. My service is entirely driven by the personnel. But I actually always saw that as an opportunity for reinvestment and improvement and continuous improvement because, I would never want to encourage somebody to leave who was doing a good job. But the moment you make that decision, it throws up an opportunity for you then to look at what you've got in terms of your infrastructure and capabilities and reinvest in it. But I think that does mark you out differently if you're the owner to say an employee. And, I mean, my grandfather always used to say to me, as the owner of your business, you're the last to get paid. And that's a good thing because it means you can get paid because you've sorted out everything else that was possible to make it, to get paid. And he was right. You're the last to get paid. And he always used to tell me as well to pay my debts and be respected, which I absolutely agree. Because again, in his world, if you don't pay, no one does business with you. I mean, this was a cash-based economy when he was doing this. So,
Okay. What's
well,
what's been your biggest challenge during the years, and how did you push through it, and who helped you push through it?
I mean, honestly, my biggest challenge, once you get through that first cycle of renewal of the business, say by year three and you're into that second phase and you get to 5 successful trading years, the biggest challenge is actually tempering your over enthusiasm to grow unnecessarily. So I made, a wrong decision back in 2014 when I, expanded my business for the first time. We were a successful business, trading very well. And I decided I was going to go and conquer the United Kingdom market, but in the wrong way around. And I opened up an office in Newcastle and opened up an office in Cardiff, which were both profitable and successful. A North of England office to extend the work we did regionally in Scotland and an office in the other national sub-parliament. The problem that happened then, Andy, was I then got divorced. So then I had this disparate network of offices, which were really difficult to service. And it put me under an enormous amount of pressure, in terms of having to go to these locations, which are not, easy. It's very difficult actually to get from Scotland to Cardiff on a daily basis. So I then had to make the tough decision as I was going through a difficult period in my private life and wanting to focus on my two daughters who are very important to me, that I was going to shut those offices. And you'll know, having talked to many business owners, shutting down profitable parts of your business, it hurts. You look at it, it's almost, but again, I just saw it as an opportunity of I'm going to reinvest in my core business, here in Glasgow, which is our main office, and I'm going to, invest in the core team, and I'm going to take this hit so that I can, give the quality that I need to my team and to my clients, and I'm going to protect the revenue of my business actually in terms of profitability, even though my turnover is going to come down, and that hurts, and I don't like the sound, I don't like the look of that. And I'm going to focus on my domestic commitments and requirements. And again, I took a decision that day when I did that. It's simple things like I'm going to do this. What I'm now going to do is buy an office. So Invicta has a permanent home and we are settled. Having gone through, the turbulence of my private life as well, it's even more important to give that stability and certainty to
Yeah.
your business. So I then went through a process of sorting all that out, shut down my two offices, with in Newcastle and Cardiff. It was quite easy. My head of office in Cardiff became a member of Parliament, so she was aspiring to head to Parliament. She became the MP for one of the Cardiff seats. My colleague in Newcastle, I effectively did a deal with him and allowed him to take some of the business out, and we kept the more valuable parts of it, which was fair. Set him up in business actually, which I'm proud of. He's still in business to this day, and then focused on my core team. My core senior team in Glasgow, who are excellent, who collectively have been with me for over 33 years now, if you add up all their service. And that was the right decision. And then I thought, well, I need to show confidence in them and confidence in our business because they may be nervous. So I immediately bought an office, which is a nice home for our business, and just reinvested. And I'm pleased to say that, that was challenging, that period, sort of 2018, 19, 20. We then got COVID, which just challenged everybody. But then actually, you come out of that, we survived that. Again, our business survived the financial crash in the late, 2008-9 period. And then I'm delighted to say, we last year we took the decision to expand in a controlled way and open up a London office, which has gone very well. So that was challenging though, because again, you're on autopilot and everything's going so well, and then something that you don't necessarily want to happen, but needs to happen then affects you and you get a bump in the road. So it's difficult when you think you're in control of your whole life to deal with circumstances that you can't control.
What's indeed it is, and that's all, and again, that's always going to happen, right? It's how we respond and deal with it. What's the next big thing for you in Invicta Public Affairs? What do the next 1 to 3 years look like in terms of growth and opportunity and challenge?
Truthfully, in the process right now, it's about building the business, to a three, possibly four office business over the next 5 years. So again, we have a profitable office now in London, which has met its objectives in the first 12 months of its existence, which I'm really pleased about. We have a very successful office in Glasgow. I am now in the process of looking at a new office in Manchester, which will give us the entire spine of Great Britain. And then I would then reconsider at that point a small office again in Cardiff, because we are actually quite uniquely positioned as a Scottish headquartered public affairs firm that we are actually heavily engaged in Wales. Almost every other player in that market is only domiciled in Wales and can't leave Wales, whereas we have the benefit of being a UK-wide firm that can relate and do a lot of business. So that if I had an ideal scenario and we could do the London office next year gets to where we absolutely need it to be. We open up a Manchester office as an extension of that. We join that up with the Glasgow office, so we've got that complete coverage in the UK market. Then I think about the Wales piece again, and in tandem in doing that. The reason for doing that isn't really about me, Andy. It's more about giving my senior management team, opportunities for growth, and also getting the business ready for a restructuring. As I'm never going to sell my firm. Um, I'm too committed to the business, but I'm always going to want to retain an involvement. And unfortunately, the tax policies of the current government make it less attractive to sell it. But that will change. But I think it's necessary now as I approach 50, that we start to seriously restructure the business and give those directors effectively partnership status and equity status in the business,
Yeah.
which is the best thing for the business, and also rewards them. I mean, as I said, I've got three fabulous colleagues at Glasgow who have collectively, one of whom has only ever worked with my business and runs my Glasgow office since she left university, and that type of individual is quite rare, and we
Yeah.
need to reflect on that.
And you need, you want loyalty from your team, and so you've got to give it.
Yeah,
So
correct.
you're right. You're restructuring the business to demonstrate loyalty to them as well.
Correct. And you asked me actually, what I'm proud of. What I'm really proud of, away from any commercial success, and money isn't really my motivating factor. I look at money a bit like fuel in a car. If you've got a nice car and you have an empty tank, you don't go anywhere with it, right? If you've got a nice business but you don't make enough money, you're not really going to get the benefits of the nice business. I also, again, if you're in the kind of professional world, you expect to be reasonably well paid, and you expect to command a reasonable price in the market. That's just the nature of being a well-educated professional operator. I mean, I remember a lawyer telling me, "You'll not get really rich, but you'll be comfortably well off," he told me in a kind of arrogant tone. And I thought that's probably right. And sadly, that's why people pay you people so much. But what I'm really proud of is my two colleagues in Glasgow are now mothers to five children between them, three and two respectively. And I'm pleased that as I became a parent and the business could adapt and I could adapt, and I have suffered no loss of status. And I was a 5, 6 day a week, 12-hour a day guy who would just go where the client needed me. And I had to change my way of working, to put my family first. I'm really pleased that I've been able to do that for my two female colleagues, and that their careers have continued to develop substantively because they've had children, not despite of it, Andy. And I kind of, that's something that I'm really passionate about, is, supporting women in business, because my business, can recruit, retain, reward women. It's an environment that's conducive for females. And if we don't take that lead, if we don't show that it's perfectly possible to have a family, Jennifer, who is my senior director, she's in her late 30s, she has three wonderful children, and she's a better professional now than she was before she had her first. So I'm really proud that we have been able to do that as a relatively small company. We're not a big corporate. We're a small company, intimate team that we can make, that business, facilitate that person's career. My other colleague, Kirsty, she's only 31. She has two children. That's a pretty young age now by professional standards to have effectively your family. She may have a third. I'm really pleased on a personal level that we could do that.
What final advice would you have, Mark, for business owners who are thinking about going out on their own or who are just starting out on their own?
I could never see a scenario. When I was running this through in my mind, having been a salaried and bonus director of a large, networked company, I couldn't see any scenario where I would not benefit from going my own, other than my salary dropped by 50% between what I was earning at my directorship and what I was prepared to pay myself to be fiscally prudent in starting my business and creating a financial framework for it. So, other than me take a 50% pay cut for the period in time until such time as revenues grew, I couldn't see any scenario, Andy, where not going into business for myself when you are interested in the area that you are, working in. You've got not just a passing interest, a deep interest in it, that you want to be in that space on terms that you can determine. I mean, my overriding thought was always, I think I can do this job better if I own the business rather than work for a business. There's always going to be a point at which, if I am working for a firm like this, when I will feel constrained or curtailed, and if I want to, remove that, the only way to remove that is set my own firm up, where I will be free to stand or fall with the level of service I provide, the way that I go about it. And then I'll be entirely responsible for every single thing that happens. Whether I put somebody in between me and that decision, I'm fundamentally still responsible. The buck stops with me. And again, some people, if you are a kind of person who thrives on that accountability and responsibility, then I think private business is absolutely the right choice. And I would like to see, actually, I've seen a dilution of interest over the last 20 years, I feel, in very well educated people, who do anything but be in the private sector. We've got this at the moment, and we deal with the public sector every single day. We see this, dilution of talent that's available to the private sector economy being corralled into not very productive public sector, but safe employment. I'm not so sure that. Well, I know that's not good for our economy. You know.
Yeah, and it's attractive, right? The good benefits and stability and all that. But
When I was leaving the civil service, Andy, we have a leave. They don't have much to offer you. Don't pay you very much, right? You work for the government, but they have great terms and conditions if you wish to be sick for 6 months, or something like that. Take a sabbatical, right? I mean, that's what they can offer you. So there's two things that struck me. My head of department, really good man, ex-army officer, arranged for me to go to the Queen's Garden party because that's what he could offer me. He couldn't give me a bonus because there is no money, but you could get me a ticket for the garden party so I could meet the Queen. So I always appreciated that and enjoyed the garden party enormously. And that was his gift to me as a senior civil servant. But when I was at my leaving drinks, so Victoria Quay in Edinburgh is the main government operational building down in Leith, and there's a really nice pub next to it. So I'm in the pub, having my leaving drinks with friends, colleagues, my head of department, and someone said to me in passing, I was 25, why are you leaving the civil service? You've got the world at your feet. You're on the fast track program. You're going to be getting a senior position like Ian in your 30s. And then he said to me, well, what about your pension? I said, I'm 25. What about my life, And I thought to myself, this is the mindset, that my pension. I mean, it's like, I take the point, right? The pension benefits are good. You can retire in, at that time, two-thirds of your final salary. And if your final salary was £100,000, then that's a pretty nice income. But look what you have to give to get there. Look
yeah,
what you have to sacrifice if you're a kind of person who wants to go and test themselves. So I will never criticize anybody in public service because we need those people. And again, we deal with them collaboratively every single day on behalf of our clients. But I just feel that the balance at the moment, Andy, between the private economy, which is the income generating and wealth producing part of the economy, without which we couldn't pay for public services, is getting out of kilter. And I look at private businesses and I see we are not doing, in my opinion, enough to encourage the brightest and the best to enter the private sector as a first choice, not as a second.
I mean, I want to talk to you about this all day, to be honest, but we are out of time.
Yeah, no, thank
Um, but it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today, Mark, and hearing about your company and your background. So I want to just thank you very much for being on the show today.
yeah, thanks,
Uh,
Andy.
and I want to thank all of our listeners and viewers, as always, for tuning into the Founders Chair. Keep an eye out for more on YouTube and Spotify. But really, it's just to say thanks once again to Mark Cummings from Invicta Public Affairs. Mark, thanks for being on the Founders Chair.
Thank you.